The saw blade caught my sleeve before it caught my arm, and by the time I pulled back, the cut across my forearm was already open and bleeding onto the workbench. 12 alien students turned around at the same moment. I remember that clearly because the silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever heard. I am the only human at Varen Technical Academy, a school built for species from 6 different star systems who all wanted to study fabrication engineering in one place. I had gotten used to being stared at. I had not gotten used to being stared at like I was already dead. "Kale," I said to the boy standing closest to me, a Thren with pale blue skin and eyes like a cat's, "can you hand me the towel?" Kale did not move. His skin had gone a shade lighter, almost white, and his throat pulsed twice before he found his voice. "You are bleeding," he said, as if I might not have noticed. "Yeah, it happens." I wrapped my hand around the cut and pressed down, the way anyone does when they nick themselves. The bleeding was already slowing. It was not a deep cut, just messy, the kind of injury that looks worse than it is because blood spreads fast on skin. That was when the room fell apart. A girl named Ovid, from a species that breathes through gill slits along their necks, let out a sound I had never heard a person make, somewhere between a scream and a whistle, and pressed a panic button on the wall that I did not even know existed. Red light filled the workshop. An alarm started somewhere above us, low and rising. "Do not move," Kale said, both hands out in front of him like he was trying to stop traffic. "Do not move, do not speak, conserve your strength." "Kale, I cut my arm. I did not get shot." "Blood is leaving your body," he said, his voice climbing higher with every word. "That is how death happens. Blood leaves, then life leaves." I opened my mouth to explain that a 2-inch cut on the forearm was not exactly a medical emergency, but the workshop doors slammed open before I could get a word out, and Professor Dessac came through them at a dead sprint, her 4 arms already reaching for a medical kit that hung by the door. Professor Dessac was Korvath, a species built like walking stone, gray-skinned and broad, and in 3 years I had never once seen her rush. She was rushing now. "Report," she said, sliding to a stop beside me and grabbing my wrist with 2 of her hands while the other 2 tore open a sterile pack. "I'm fine," I said. "Really, it's a shallow cut." "You are speaking normally," she said, staring at my face like she was checking for symptoms of something. "That is either a very good sign or a very bad one." "It's a good sign. It means I'm fine." She pressed a cooling gel patch onto the cut, and within a few seconds the bleeding stopped completely, sealed under a thin blue film. The whole class had gathered in a loose circle around us now, and nobody was saying anything. "You should be in shock," Ovid said quietly from the back of the group. "Why are you not in shock?" "Because it's a small cut," I said. "I've had worse from a kitchen knife." The room went very still again. "You have survived worse than this," Kale repeated slowly, like the words did not fit together in his mouth, more than once. I realized then, watching their faces, that nobody had ever explained to them how human bodies actually work. I had assumed someone would have covered it in orientation. Apparently not. Professor Dessac taped a bandage over the sealed cut and looked at me for a long moment. "Come to my office after class," she said. "All of you. I think it is time we discuss this properly." That afternoon, 12 students and 1 visibly still shaken professor sat in a half circle while I explained, as simply as I could, that human skin heals itself, that our blood has a built-in system to stop its own leaking, and that a cut like the one on my arm was something most humans barely thought twice about. "Your body repairs a wound while you are still standing there," Ovid said, testing the idea out loud like she did not quite believe it. "Most of the time, yeah. And you knew this would happen before it happened." "I mean, I know cuts heal, so I don't panic when I get one." Kale leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "On my planet, an open wound of that size requires 3 days of medical monitoring. If it is left untreated for even 1 hour, infection risk becomes severe. Our immune systems work pretty fast, I said. It's not that we don't get infections, we just have a good head start on fighting them. Professor Dissa, who had been quiet through most of this, finally spoke. There is a reason humans were invited to this academy despite having the smallest number of applicants of any species we accept. Your engineering scores were excellent, yes, but your species also has a reputation. A reputation for what? For not stopping, she said simply. I did not think much of that conversation again until 3 weeks later, when our class took a field trip to the old mineral caves outside the city to study natural rock formations for a materials course. It was supposed to be a simple trip. Walk in, take samples, walk out. We were about 40 minutes into the lower tunnel when the ceiling groaned. I had grown up near a place with old mining tunnels, and I knew that sound. Everyone else clearly did not, because they kept walking, chatting, taking notes, while I stopped dead and grabbed the nearest sleeve, which happened to be Ovid's. Move, I said, now back the way we came. What? The groan came again, louder, and this time a fine spray of dust drifted down from the ceiling in the beam of my headlamp. That got everyone's attention. Go, I said, pushing people toward the tunnel entrance. Walk fast, don't run, don't push each other. We were maybe 20 steps from the exit when the ceiling gave way behind us. It was not a huge collapse, not the kind that buries a tunnel completely, but a support beam came down at an angle and caught Cale across the shoulder and side as he was turning to look back, and it dropped him hard onto the tunnel floor. The class scattered into panic almost instantly. Ovid was screaming for the professor. 2 other students had frozen completely, staring at the settling dust like they expected the whole mountain to come down next. Professor Dissa was pulling people toward the exit with her 4 arms, trying to keep the group together, but she could not get to Cale, not with rock and broken support beam between them. I could. I climbed over the beam, checked that nothing above me looked ready to move, and got my hands under Cale's shoulders. He was conscious, breathing fast, his blue skin gone nearly gray with pain, one arm held tight against his body at an angle that told me it was probably broken. Hey, I said, keeping my voice level, look at me, not at your arm. It is broken, he said through his teeth. I felt it break. Yeah, probably. We're going to deal with that outside, not in here. I got an arm under his good shoulder and pulled him up slowly, letting him lean his weight on me. Can you walk if I hold you up? I do not know. Let's find out, 1 step. He took the step, then another. I kept talking the whole way out, not because I had anything important to say, but because I remembered that people in pain do better when they have something to focus on besides the pain itself. I told him about a time I broke my ankle playing a sport back home and finished the match anyway before anyone realized what had happened. I am not sure he believed me. I am not sure I cared, as long as he kept walking. We came out of the tunnel into daylight to find the rest of the class in various states of distress, and Professor Dissa already calling for a transport. She took one look at Cale's arm, then at me, standing there dusty and scraped up but upright, and something in her expression shifted. You went back in, she said. After the collapse began, you went back in. He was closer to the exit than the rest of you thought. It wasn't far. It was far enough that none of us moved, Ovid said quietly. Cale was loaded onto the transport, still gripping my sleeve with his good hand, and before the doors closed, he said something I did not expect. You were calm the entire time, even when the ceiling was falling. How? I thought about that question the whole ride back, because it was a fair one, and I did not have a clever answer for it. The truth is not that humans do not feel fear. We feel plenty of it. The truth is closer to this. Somewhere far back in our history, our ancestors learned that panic gets you killed faster than almost anything else does, and the ones who could push the fear down long enough to keep moving were the ones who survived long enough to have children. That instinct got passed down, generation after generation, until it became something most of us do not even have to think about anymore. We just do it. I tried to explain some version of that to the class the next week, sitting in Professor Dissaz's office again, Kale's arm now wrapped and healing in a sling, his color back to its normal pale blue. "So your species is built to keep functioning through disaster," Professor Dissaz said slowly, "and to heal quickly afterward, and to treat both of those things as ordinary. When you say it like that, it sounds a lot more impressive than it feels from the inside." "It should sound impressive," she said. "It is." Kale, sitting beside her with his sling and his newly healed patience for human behavior, gave me a look that was somewhere between admiration and lingering fear. "I have decided something," he said. "What's that?" "I am never letting you walk anywhere alone again. Every time you are unsupervised, something happens and you survive it, and I do not understand how." I laughed, and for the first time since I had arrived at that academy, so did he. That night, walking back to my dorm alone under two moons that were not the one I grew up under, I thought about how strange it was that the thing making my classmates most nervous around me was not anything I had built or designed or studied. It was simply the fact that I kept getting hurt and kept getting back up, and that after enough time, they had stopped expecting anything less. I still had not told them about the time I walked on a sprained ankle for 2 days because I did not want to miss a final exam. I figured that story could wait for another semester. There is only so much a person can explain to a group of aliens in one sitting, and only so much they can believe about a species that treats survival less like a struggle and more like a Tuesday.